No, I didn't. I told
This is my room.
Because these benches were switched.
Jacob?
Here.
Lund?
Here.
Watts? Allen? Here. John?
Here. And approval of the minutes.
Move to approve. Jacob?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Allen? Yes. Johnston?
Yes. Adoption of the agenda.
Move it up.
Jacob?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Allen? Yes. Johnston?
Yes. All right, next we have National Disability Awareness Month.
Laura Martins, do you want to come on up? And I believe you have Melissa with you.
You guys come right over here. You hang out with my kids somewhere around here. Okay, she likes us really close. Okay, so we are going to read for National Disability Employment Awareness Month. Whereas during Disability Employment Awareness Month, we reaffirm our commitment to ensuring that our great state's promise to extend disability employment awareness to all our citizens. And whereas the youth with disabilities residing in the state of Missouri receive education and training to prepare them for their post-secondary employment goals through education, on-the-job training experience, and accommodations to meet each student's individual needs and skills. And whereas opportunities through local businesses, families, communities, and schools have been provided to enhance the employment education for individuals with disabilities. Working together as a unified team, we have brought about significant changes in the perception of employment of individuals with disabilities. And whereas workplaces are a welcoming place for the talents of all individuals, they can showcase each individual's strengths, skills, and interests as they become more productive members of the community. Now, therefore, I, Danielle Johnston, Mayor of the City of Warrensburg, in keeping with National Disability Awareness Month, do hereby proclaim the month of October to be National Disability Employment Awareness Month in the City of Warrensburg, dated October 22nd, 2018. No, that's not, yeah.
this first and second reading.
Yeah, okay, just make sure.
Yeah,
That doesn't miss
I
anything.
noticed that.
Okay, next we have a first and second reading of an ordinance authorizing the city manager and city clerk to execute contracts with civic organizations for the fiscal year 19 annual services. Matthew?
Mayor, members of the city council, what you have before you are contracts with the various, civic organizations within Warrensburg. The funds for those contracts were budgeted in the FY19 budget in total $160,100. There is one contract that needs a little discussion, and that is the contract with Main Street. It's been communicated to the council and staff, needs to know how many events or festivals to be included in the contract. I think, is there someone here from Main Street tonight? Would you like to come up?
That's just coming out, and our recommendation to council would probably be is to make a motion to have the Main Street one for separate consideration, and then the rest can be voted on, and then we can discuss and get staff directive on the Main Street one, contract.
I'll make a motion to move the Main Street one out for public consideration and approve the others.
Jacobs,
Yes.
Lund,
Yes.
Allen,
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Is that a time we can discuss now
Does that
about
need to
Main
be?
Street?
Well, we need a second reading on that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Need to be a second reading on that one.
You would pass that ordinance to second reading by title as
Okay, I
amended.
thought
Oh,
we were.
all right. You got it.
Okay.
I knew what you were trying to
This is an ordinance authorizing the city manager and city clerk to execute contracts with civic organizations for fiscal year 19 annual services. This is for adoption or rejection, Jackson.
Sure,
I don't know where that came
You know
from.
Now.
Yes.
Anyway, let's change that to Jacobs.
Yes.
Lund,
Yes.
Allen.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes. Okay, now for Main Street. Okay. Yes.
I think we're just gonna discuss Main Street
Yeah,
and
yeah,
staff
put it back in.
direction of like how many events and.
And then put it back in.
How do you
Well,
want
with
to
the
do this?
second reading, we got an actual vote on approving the ordinance?
Yeah. that's what it is.
Okay, then yeah, now you can have discussion on the Main Street.
Well, I think we voted to amend it and then we moved to the second reading. I think we ought to do the
I
same.
amended, if you get a second reading, that's one vote, so we need another vote.
First
Oh,
vote
so
was
we'll
amended.
just do
This
amendment.
this one, we moved it, now this is.
Can you see we don't normally do it this way?
Rejection.
Okay, so I don't need to read the title again, I can just take a roll.
You need to take the vote.
Jacobs,
Yes.
this is for adoption or rejection. Jacobs,
Yes.
Lund,
Yes.
Allen.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Now
Now
we
we
can
got
talk.
to.
I'm like, what is
Just going in and.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Okay, so we were gonna talk, I think the, conversation is surrounding the, events specifically, and then the number of events, yeah. So,
So right now we have a blank, and so we just want to piece in how many, as well as specifically which ones should we, put a finger on, which ones are the annual events that happen year after year and we know aren't likely to change. We want to be careful not to pigeonhole you, so you can't, have some flexibility, but we also want to make sure that certain staples, continue.
okay,
And so, I guess the question would be, in your opinion, kind of what are the main ones that you guys see from a Main Street perspective that are, these are pillars of our community and these are the ones that we want to make sure, we know these are not going to go away, that
I would say Bird Fest and Sounds of Summer concert series. Now, whether we do that in a way where we just maybe have one at the beginning of the summer and make it bigger and better, and then maybe one at the end of the summer, or just have one, I guess, within kind of what we were wanting direction from you guys.
So I don't have an answer for that question, but what about Dickinson one? Is that something that Main Street wants to get rid
Yes,
of?
no, we're keeping Dickens as well.
You had mentioned that.
So do you want our full 19 calendar, is that kind of what you're asking? Like what events, like community events on our 19 calendar that we wanna keep?
No, according to the website, what you have listed under events is Day of Care, Sounds of Summer, 4th of July, Bird Fest, Downtown Trick or Treat, Dickens Christmas, First Friday's Art Walk, Piccadilly, Sweet Treat Trail, Community Sidewalk Sale, Restaurant Week, Shop Small Saturday, and Farm to Table. So we've agreed that Bird Fest and Sounds of Summer is gonna stay in some capacity, and Dickens Christmas, so you have 3 there.
Piccadilly as well, I mean, that's one of our biggest fundraisers. So
Yeah,
I-
and
That's-
for us, we'll
that's
probably
yours.
stay away, we won't put a finger on the fundraisers,
Okay.
I don't think, just because that's for you guys.
Bird Fest was a separate event though, it wasn't included in the events that was to be done by Main Street. That was a totally separate thing, that was even a separate contract at one time.
Okay.
So I don't think,
Funded separately.
yeah, I think you probably need to put those, whatever the group or whatever number of festivals and events that you want Main Street to do, that needs to be separate from
So can we combine those though, this last contract?
Bird
That
Fest
whole
listed-
thing kind of
listed in this
dissolved.
one.
Yeah, I thought the
It's
previous,
it's listed separately in the contract.
I think we want to put it in the contract, don't we, for one of the events
Well, I think we're talking about all the events that we want listed in the contract,
specifically.
specifically.
I know, Love What's Local, we felt that what we were doing with Love What's Local and then what we were doing with other downtown events was kind of the same thing. And so what we chose to do was, plan to take those off of our 2019 calendar. However, still partner with the chamber, and just provide a liaison from Warrensburg Main Street for those special events. So it wouldn't necessarily fall under our calendar so that we can concentrate on Dickens, Sounds of Summer, Bird Fest in a larger capacity. So that's pretty much what we kind of eliminated.
So no restaurant week, sweet trails, those aren't.
They still will be happening through the chamber, just not through Warrensburg Main Street. Minus the staff, one staff person would assist with the chamber.
So my understanding with Love What's Local, when it began as a partnership between the city, the chamber, and Main Street. And each of us dedicated staff time. It's pretty much volunteer, none of us really puts any physical money into it. But we all allocate staff time for helping with the organization and those types of things. So obviously the chamber has Suzanne Taylor is the director who participates in that. The city has Barb Carroll that provides that support, and then Main Street used to be Julie Turnipseed, and now it's Crystal. So that would be a change to that significantly. So the chamber and the city would continue to dedicate time and resources, and actually that would be up a little bit if council agrees that Main Street isn't participating in that at the same level.
I personally would like to see Main Street involved at the same level they are, because with that list that was just read off, I mean, when I think of Love What's Local, I think of any businesses we have in Warrensburg, but that list basically is Main Street. You know, I mean, so I personally would like to see that in the contract that you guys are going to do.
I was a little shocked when I heard the news of that, because to me, this sent a message to the city and the staff and the council that Main Street doesn't want to be part of Love What's Local. That was how I took it, and I was a little upset for the city of Warrensburg.
I wasn't in that conversation and how it kind of transpired. However, I can tell you that that's not the intention. Warrensburg Main Street is very passionate about our downtowns and our events and the businesses. But we feel that every year we're asked to bring something new to events, bring something better, make it bigger. And so we are stretched fairly thin with just 2 people in our office. And so we thought that if a lot of what we're already doing is focusing on our businesses and opening the doors and bringing more people downtown, that our role in the Love What's Local area would not be as strong in previous years, so that we can concentrate on bringing new things to the other events.
Do you know roughly what kind of time span you're thinking that would take you with Love What's Local?
And honestly, it's not a huge event.
What I thought.
It's not. But it, I mean, it does require meetings and so that takes away from your day, and then printing out papers and passing out flyers and going door to door to businesses, which is all things that we already do for other events. So we just kind of wanted to put them together rather than having 3 separate events, like Restaurant Week, Shop Small, Sweet Tree Trail, and make it like Dickens have the Sweet Tree Trail. So kind of combining them, so we weren't really trying to take them away. We were just kind of trying to do them differently and then provide someone directly to Suzanne Taylor and Barb to still have that going, just not there. That person wouldn't be out in Warrensburg Main Street. She would just be a liaison between the two.
I see, in my opinion, I see the Love What's Local campaign to be probably the one that aligns the most with your mission. And I think that it's important. I don't think we should put stipulations on, we want to make sure you do a Restaurant Week and a Sweet Tree Trail and a sidewalk sale. I don't think we should do that. I think we should say that that is very, very important that the 3 organizations, the city, the chamber, and Main Street all coordinate together, because in doing so, you kind of reinforce the mission, and just being in the same room that many times, you're able to understand what the other parties are doing and able to plan something new. And maybe it's something new and fresh and invigorating every year. But to me, I think Love What's Local as a core and Bergfest are my top 2. And then they would go downhill from there, in my opinion. But I think that it's very, very important to make sure that everybody's on board with, the Love What's Local, and that's the whole core of what Main Street's trying to do, is to inform people that we want you to understand your buying decisions, and we want you to come back into downtown and reinvest in your community, and educating them on the purpose of that, and how buying something at a mom and pop business that's locally owned, what the economic impact of those dollars are. And then you branch out and you go to a big box store here in town, how much that money stays local, and then you go to someplace out of town as well as online. And for them to understand that, I think that's important, and I think that being at that table is that would be the top of my list, Bergfest, and then followed by Sounds of Summer.
And obviously Dickinson's one of the ones I think that's the community loves that. I mean, there's 3 right there that, Piccadilly's a fundraiser, big one that's totally up to you guys. So I think that's one of our events that we're asking you that is something new. You can make your decision.
Yeah, I think it was hard. I think when we looked at the list, I don't know that there was anything to see in the future. When did the events coordinator position get filled? Recently.
Yeah. Okay. I'm that again.
So I'm trying to clarify, because I had this conversation with Crystal before when we were consulting some positions. So my understanding was there was 3 positions. There was the director, the assistant director, and the events coordinator position.
Correct.
And my understanding was, when she talked about combining the assistant director and the events coordinator position, we had a conversation about that, and I was told that an intern was upgraded to events coordinator. Because that's what we use to continue to pay, because you have 3 contributions from the city that we pay for. We pay a contribution to support your administrative costs. That's the main body of the contract. Secondly, we pay a separate payment to support the events coordinator position to the tune of about $10,000 a year. And then thirdly, we give a 3rd contribution to support Bergfest specifically. And so when that issue came up, and I expressed some concern to Crystal about not having an events coordinator position, I said, well, then the city would no longer be underneath the obligation of the contract to pay that $10,000 a year towards the events coordinator position. So now I'm getting a different story.
So what we've done, we've eliminated the assistant director position, moved me back to the events coordinator because I was prior events coordinator. Our intern has taken a job elsewhere, so she is no longer there. So I will go back to events coordinator, and we have opened up a position for an office assistant.
Okay. So you'll eventually get back at the 3 staff, the director, an office assistant, and an events coordinator.
Correct.
Do you foresee that when that position takes place, that a lot of the event management side will be probably easier to manage, I would assume.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
it's
we
focused
hope,
on that.
yeah.
Yeah.
We hope that our office assistant will be able to do a lot of the busier work and, so that, you know, we can focus on making the events better. So it just will take, you know, training and time.
Is there anything on that list that you guys see that, I mean, I hate to cut it that way, but just to get better direction?
So we hope that you continue to do all of them.
Yeah.
Or reinvent them and,
Yeah.
you know, maybe you consolidate a little bit, but
I mean, I
I
know,
think we should kind of be choosy with the, no
Is
more
there
than
a-
4, maybe more like 3. you know,
Is there
keep
one
it-
you all are thinking of with Dickinson and Bergfest, something else?
I think with the Sounds of Summer, we were hoping to do, just one. Yeah, and not because we don't enjoy the others, we just feel like if we can make one bigger, probably at the beginning of, summer, like the Bird Spot, make that one bigger and better. And, cause, you know, by the time the middle of the summer and the end of summer comes, it's pretty quiet around here, and so we don't have a really good turnout for the amount of time that we spend getting it together and then staffing it. So we were hoping from cutting that from 3 to 1. And keep it at the beginning of the summer.
And I think if we do include, you know, Sounds of Summer or, you know, any others that are a cluster, that we keep it broad. That way you have the flexibility to put it all in one, or whether you want to split it up into multiple. I like being vague so that they have flexibility, so that they can keep it fresh every year.
If I get an opinion, I know that I'm probably the wrong person to say this since I do all the kids stuff, but I really like actual concert. I think that it brings, kind of that artsy side of Warrensburg that we don't get any other way.
I mean, I think Sounds of Summer is a great use of Pine Street, because it gives us a chance to close Pine Street down and actually, you know, personally, I think if we advertise it more, I mean, this year here, I mean, I was literally finding out at the last second about it, you know, so, I mean, I think that those events are, you know, I like the 3 concerts. I'd like to see two bands at each one of the concerts personally, you know, but that's your guys' schedule.
So at that point, would that keep the contract very similar or nearly identical?
Well, I think Casey has it as far as, we really like to see Bergfest and Lovewood's local campaign still go on. I myself, for the community especially, is Dickinson. That's one of, that's huge, that's 3 events. And then you guys can do your fundraising.
Well, that doesn't include your concert series.
Bergfest, concert series, Dickens.
Or, I'd love
Loveless local, right?
Those would have been my 4.
We're gonna do all 4 of those anyways. It's just, and leave the concert series, just call it concert series, and it can be in the summer, you know, you could.
I mean,
do
to
it-
have
do it-
one
do it-
series,
do it as many as you want, whenever you want, just call it a concert.
Sounds of Summer, yeah, series would imply.
Yeah, so something, either a concert or Sounds of Summer, if you are sure, for sure, in the summer, you might go out to a concert in the winter time, that might be maybe fun.
yeah, it would be summer, Sounds of Summer. And, I mean, if we can get, the thing too, with the Pine Street one, which I agree, I mean, it's great to have that area blocked off, adults can come out and enjoy it, but it is a lot of work for the bar owners to pull out for 100 people. And if the lack of marketing is, or promotion is on Main Street, then hopefully with our new person, that can step it up. But, you know, it's just a lot to ask of them, and they then get irritated with us that we are requesting them to pull out to participate, and then, you know, it's pretty quiet. So, and you know, we talked about maybe like making a cornhole tournament and bringing other things to it to make it busier. But again, then that rolls us right into Bergfest, and then that's all the things that we have at Bergfest. And then it's Bergfest in August, and then Bergfest in September. So,
Unless you did the concert in
May and June.
the earth.
yeah, in June, like if we did the May one at the complex and then the June one. So we could, or we could do, yeah, beginning summer, end of summer, so, I guess,
Or we could just call it a Pine Street event as well.
Okay.
You can keep it as vague as possible.
Yeah.
You know, we just wanna have one minimum of one large event,
okay,
on
on Pine Street,
on Pine Street.
okay. So is that 5?
I think that would be in lieu of the concert, well, if you were
Yeah.
calling it that
Yeah.
specifically. So I think you're still at 4, Bergfest, Ludwig's Local Dickens, and Pine Street event.
To include the city complex work spot, right?
Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
Okay,
The same with your farm table and your picnic
Yeah.
table, those are yours.
okay,
Does that help?
perfect, yep.
Good, and does that help with the contract?
Yeah, so we will put 4 in for the number of,
Can we specify the 4?
That's what we talked about, yeah.
Okay.
We'll specify the 4 events.
Yeah.
We'll take out the 4 event language, and we'll just specify that the contract covers, the Dickens Festival, Bergfest. Are we calling it Pine Street event, or we
No,
call it
probably.
Sounds of Summer?
Yeah, I mean, probably keep it the same, sounds the same.
Cause we do a Pine Street event,
And then it's at the complex, then
Bergsbach is
Yeah.
left on its own, so the city plans and organizes that on its own, or, I don't know how that goes.
Find a way to make it as vague as possible.
It's called Sounds of Summer, and then they have no Pine Street.
Part of the problem is the contract was vague, and so we had no way of
Yeah, we had zero.
delineating what was included or what wasn't. So we're trying to actually specify more clearly what the contract entails. So we will list those 4 things, and we'll bring the contract back for.
The model for Sounds of Summer has worked really well in the past, so I don't know that you would wanna necessarily reinvent the wheel by trying something totally different.
But we'll leave it vague as Sounds of Summer, we're not specifying a series or a certain number of concerts.
Okay,
It's up to you guys to determine what Sounds of Summer means. But in the contract, it'll be stipulated that's part of your funding, is if you will organize and pull off one of those events.
I'm not saying, Loveless Local, do we need to say staff member involved in Loveless Local, or? is that-
Can do the same partnership, the 3 partnerships, everybody carrying their full share as it started, whenever we kicked this off.
We'll come up with
That's
some language
15
to
or something.
include that in terms of the contract. And we'll bring that back at the next council meeting to be approved by ordinance again.
good, thank you.
Okay. I think we have some discussion here. So, right, okay, so we have 2 different ordinances we need to discuss here. Do you want me to read? No,
I
read
think
them
we have a
until we
discussion,
discuss.
and then
Yeah,
So we'll start first one.
okay, so the first one would include, sorry, let me make sure I say this right here. I'm sorry?
I can
I
speak
just
to
read
it.
for it.
or you just.
I don't wanna say it wrong, there's a lot of people
So-
listening to this.
Last council meeting, we had significant conversation. The direction of council to staff was to prepare an ordinance that allows for trap neuter release. Keep it as simple as possible, but still allow for the ability for the city to enforce basically the collection of any problem cats and those types of things. So, the city attorney has prepared that. Since then, staff has continued to do some research, including attending, we are at the International City County Manager Association Annual Conference in Baltimore. I did have Joe go attend a specific workshop speaking about TNR programs, hearing feedback from city staff who work in cities that have implemented these types of programs. And based off of that feedback and off of the research that I personally have done on this, I continue to see and hear that it's important that the city regulate the feeding of feral cat populations. And so that is what the second ordinance is. So the first ordinance allows for feeding of feral cat populations. The second ordinance, the only difference in it is the withdrawal of allowing for the feeding of the feral cat populations. And so both are in front of council for your discussion and consideration. I would like to go and share some of the things that I found. I did provide a number of links to articles on those sorts of things to council previously, but this is a quote.
Harold, I can't hear you.
You can't hear back here most
Is
of
the
the
speaker system
conversation.
off?
I don't know if you don't have microphones
Where's our
or
speaker over here?
what's going
Shut
on.
down. All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. So basically what I was saying is staff has done a significant amount of study on this. There's two different ordinances that staff has prepared for council. Both implement a trap neuter release program or allow it to occur within city limits. The difference being one allows for the feeding of the feral cat populations and the second one does not. And I was delineating that we recently attended a conference of city managers. It's our professional conference that we go to, and there was a workshop there regarding TNR programs. And I asked Joe, our intern, to attend that class and received some feedback from other city managers and city staffs that had implemented these types of programs. And it coincided with a lot of the research that I have done personally regarding the need to prohibit or limit the feeding of feral cat populations. But we were leaving it for council to decide what they want to do. So both ordinances are prepared and both are available to the council should they choose to do that. I want to read a quote from a couple different studies. This one is from 2013. This was done by the Michigan State University College of Law. And it states, usually a feral cat's calling number of cats is self-sustainable, meaning when the carrying capacity or the maximum number of cats the area can sustain is met, current calling numbers will defend the territory, prohibiting new cats from entering the area. Lack of territorial behavior makes the carrying capacity increase and a larger cat population result instead of decreasing the population. This scenario is typically found when caretakers overfeed the colony, leaving more food than the colony needs to survive. More cats move into the area because more food is available than the colony needs. That is consistent with the feedback we heard from several city managers throughout the country with their implementation of TNR programs. There's another study from the University of Nebraska Extension where they make the same summary. They say the supplemental feeding of feral cats should be discouraged and prohibited. So I wanted to provide that. I also wanted to provide some studies regarding the effectiveness of TNR in general. This is an issue briefing paper regarding management of feral cats in colonies and trap, neuter, and release programs. This was from June 2014. This is in the state of Texas, so this was prepared by the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. It says TPWD provides this objective science-based statement to organizations and governments tasked with the balancing the needs of feral and free-roaming cats, public health, and local ecosystem health. And they have this to state regarding the efficacy of TNR programs. TNR programs are ineffective. Managers of these programs cannot prevent new cats from being added to a population, and they cannot neuter the vast majority, 70 to 90% of the population. That comes from some other studies that I saw that were done academically, stating that in order for TNR programs to be effective, you would need to spay and neuter 70 to 90% of the feral cat population. It continues, both of which are required assumptions for population reduction. TNR programs repeatedly fail to eliminate or control cat colonies due to ongoing cat immigration from surrounding areas. Scientifically vetted studies that demonstrated that TNR programs do not prevent overpopulation of feral cats, reduce population size over time, prevent losses to native wildlife, or prevent disease transmission. And then finally, in my research, I also found a news story by PBS with regards to this, and I've asked staff to prepare that to show the council as well. I'm not arguing against TNR. I'm fine if the council wants to implement a TNR program. But based off of the research and based off of the feedback I've had from other city managers that have implemented these programs with a history of 10 to 15 years, I would strongly encourage the council to consider some regulation of the feeding of these populations as well. Gary, you want to play the video, and then I'll leave it to council to discuss what they would like to do regarding the two ordinances.
For 160 years, BNSF, the engine that connects us.
Now, a story about cats, not the ones living in homes, but stray and feral cats that live outside. By some estimates, there are 80 million feral cats in this country, and the question of how to control them is sparking controversy. Animal rights activists who want to save stray cats say there is an alternative to euthanizing feral cats, a method they say will control the cat population that's more humane and effective. But will it work? I think it's something working from our partner Reveal at the Center for Investigative Reporting has the story.
Americans have long been obsessed with cats in commercials, cartoons, and of course on the internet. But for every cat in our homes, there's a stray one on the loose. Roaming parking lots, alleyways, fields and backyards, they're everywhere. And increasingly, it's a problem. Take Antioch, California, about 40 miles east of San Francisco. The town is home to about 17,000 strays, one cat for every 6 citizens. At the local animal shelter, Monica Helgamo is overwhelmed.
This one here obviously is saying, pet me, pet me. This cat here, right, you see the ears go back? That's a feral cat.
Feral cats like this one are basically wild animals, and so they're not candidates for adoption.
We'll do what we can and see if we can find a place for her to go and live for life. If not, we're gonna have to have to put her to sleep, euthanize her.
Antioch is typical. There are an estimated 80 million stray and feral cats in the U.S. Traditionally, the only way to deal with this overpopulation was to euthanize them. More than 1 million cats are killed in animal shelters every year. And that's made some cat lovers so mad, they've gotten organized.
Are you guys ready to save some more cats?
This is a national gathering of feral cat advocates near Washington, D.C. It's hosted by Alley Cat Allies. They run a network of 250,000 activists that fight for feral cats.
We changed the community, we brought neighbors together, we changed cat care forever.
Becky Robinson is the founder and president of Alley Cat Allies. She helped pioneer a population control method called Trap, Neuter, Return, or TNR. Instead of killing them, it's about sterilizing cats and letting them live the rest of their lives outdoors.
Trap, Neuter, Return for feral cats works, and what we mean when we say it works is that it stops the breeding of the cats, so there's no more litters of kittens.
In Antioch, Susan Smith shows me how Trap, Neuter, Return is done. She's supported by Alley Cat Allies, and she's trying to get the city to embrace TNR.
I'm gonna bait the trap with a little wet food, and then some tuna, some avocado.
The cats are spayed or neutered at a local clinic, given rabies shots, and the tips of their ears are removed to show that they've been fixed. Then, Smith returns them back to the streets where they were trapped. She continues to feed them in what are known as cat colonies. The feeding is key. Without it, she couldn't attract other cats in the area to trap them and get them fixed. TNR is catching on. More than 400 cities and counties have adopted this method over the past 25 years. Even pet products retailers have signed on, creating nonprofits that have donated tens of millions of dollars to TNR groups. Brian Cordes spent the last 5 years managing TNR grants for PetSmart charities.
PetSmart Charities, in wanting to end cat overpopulation, has embraced trap neuter return as the most effective way to make that happen.
TNR's expansion alarms wildlife conservation groups.
This is an emerging conservation crisis.
Brad Sizemore directs the invasive species programs at the American Bird Conservancy in Washington, D.C.
There were 0 domestic cats in North America in 1492, which means that we now have well over 100 million invasive predators roaming the landscape, killing wildlife.
Sizemore cites a study from the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute that estimates cats kill around 2.4 billion birds and 12.3 billion mammals every year. On Jekyll Island in southern Georgia, Dr. Sonia Hernandez and her research team are seeing this from the cat's perspective. They're putting cameras on cats.
So far, we've been able to collar 31 cats. We know that a majority of them do hunt, despite the fact that they get fed.
The cat camera footage shows that even well-fed cats in TNR programs hunt anything they can get their paws on. They're just hardwired to hunt. And the food used to attract the cats and trap them also draws in other predators that can cause problems. Raccoons, skunks, and possums compete with the cats for food.
We want to be very careful that we don't encourage a lot of wildlife coming together, sharing pathogens, and then potentially bringing that to people.
Back in Antioch, California, public health concerns prompted the city to propose a ban on feeding cats on public property.
The cats are not the villains in this.
There was stiff opposition.
They don't deserve to starve. They deserve to have a right to live.
I'm not afraid of a cat urinating on my foot. I'm afraid of the meth heads that go around my building.
Questions going over here?
Dr. Julie Levy is a professor of veterinary medicine and is considered the preeminent feral cat researcher in the country. She runs one of America's largest trap neuter return programs. It's called Operation Catnip, and it receives support from PetSmart charities.
I'm very confident we're going to see this nationally as a successful model for cat population control.
In many ways, Operation Catnip is the best case scenario for trap neuter return. It's well funded with a steady stream of volunteers. But when a population biologist analyzed Operation Catnip's numbers, the results came up short.
Cat populations were not significantly going down, and that's probably the single, take-home lesson here.
Dr. Patrick Foley teaches at California State University in Sacramento. He says there's no proof TNR reduces large populations of cats. They just reproduce too quickly.
Imagine introducing a single pregnant female cat to an island. She could produce 3 infants plus herself by the end of the year. That means the population will multiply by 4 in 1 year. And next year, if the same thing happens, then it'll be 16. The year after that, 64. If you had money in the bank at that kind of rate, you would be delighted. You would, in fact, be owning the world after a very few years. And so we can't.
According to Foley's calculations, Operation Catnip would need to stay about 75% of the female cats in the county in order to make this work. That's roughly 10 times more than they're able to do right now. I asked Brian Cordes why PetSmart Charities is involved with a nationwide campaign when the research doesn't show that it works on large cat populations.
I'm totally comfortable with trap neuter return moving forward on a much larger scale than it has in the past, even though we don't have 100% scientific proof that's been peer-reviewed and published that it works on that large of a scale.
While Cordes remains committed to the trap, neuter, and return of feral cats, his employer is reconsidering. Since we recorded this interview with Cordes, PetSmart Charities announced late last year that it was laying off its entire staff. In a statement sent to us, a spokesperson said the organization is reassessing its programs, including its support of trap, neuter, return, but they will honor all existing grant commitments. Although one of the biggest funders of trap, neuter, return is having second thoughts, The feral cat movement continues to gain political clout. Last month, after a long standoff, Antioch's cat feeders prevailed. The city council granted Susan Smith and her allies the right to feed as part of an official trap, neuter, and return program.
Come on, babies.
When it comes to controlling cats, it's not only about science, it's about our emotions. And in the court of public opinion, it seems that America will always back the cat. For PBS NewsHour, I'm Aditya Samamurthy in Antioch, California.
And earlier this week, I was in New York and spoke with Aditya Samamurthy. As your piece points out, there's still some question about the effectiveness of this approach. So why are companies and charities putting money behind it?
Well, it's a good question, and it's one that I put to PetSmart Charities. And the response that I got is that the founders of the company want to end homelessness, cat homelessness. They want to end the euthanasia of cats in shelters, and they believe that this is the best approach. When you look at it through strictly a animal rights, animal welfare perspective, I think there is something to be said for it. The problem is that at the city level, at the county level, when you're talking about many thousands of cats, the research just doesn't show that it's working at that level.
Okay, so let's talk about the societal impact. I mean, how significant of a problem is this in different communities?
The study that I referenced is the University of Georgia's cat camera study, and what's really interesting here is that, even if you feed cats on a daily basis and you spay and neuter them, they're still going to go out and hunt. They're instinctual predators. The University of Georgia study shows that cats are not just killing mice and rats. They're killing, frogs, a surprising number of them, reptiles, amphibians, small mammals, and birds. And so if you have vulnerable species in your community, it's a problem.
Is there any way to domesticate a feral cat? I mean, if you catch them young enough?
Yeah, it's, I did that. I've adopted a kitten that was born to a feral mother, and he's doing really well, and he loves humans. So he's definitely tame now, but for adult feral cats, that's very rare, and it's not a policy prescription. We're not going to adopt our way out of this problem.
You talk a little bit about the law of large numbers. How do you have her get control of a population that is multiplying as quickly as these cats are?
It's really difficult, and the one thing that I found is that this is a largely volunteer-driven effort. The movement to sterilize these cats and put them back outside is largely driven by volunteers who are incredibly hardworking. They have jobs, they have families, and they do this work. Unfortunately, as I'm finding, it's not proving to work at that scale. It's just a really difficult endeavor.
Aditya Samamurthy joining us from San Francisco, from Reveal and the Center for Investigative Reporting. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mark.
For more on this story, visit Reveal, the investigative public radio show at revealnews.org.
So my point here is just simply to state, I'm trying to manage expectations. I'm not opposed to having a TNR program, but if we're expecting the results, I'm not even going to make the argument regarding protecting other species and those types of things. I'm just talking about the effectiveness of the TNR program. In order to do that properly, it needs to be a sustained effort over a long period of time. Simply passing an ordinance and the way people do it isn't going to have as big of an impact as what I think some people assume it will. It'll have some impact, but as they've stated, and I found this consistently over many studies, in order to have a truly effective TNR program, you have to spay and neuter 70 to 90% of the feral cat population. And even the group, Project Catnip, who is one of the premier TNR programs in the country and extremely well funded, aren't even achieving that goal. So, again, at this point, I'll leave it for council conversation. I'm not opposed to the TNR program. I still strongly believe, off of the input and the research I've seen, that we should limit the feeding of feral cat populations. But ultimately, that's a decision of the council. So with that, I'll leave it to council to deliberate.
I think one of my concerns would be, and I am not opposed or okay with it, either one, I'm still kind of on the fence. I don't want to bring any more to our animal control place. Animal control needs to pick up the dog or the cats and then take them to the shelter. shelters are already overpopulated as it is now. So that was one of my concerns of this program if the ordinance was passed.
I know Sarah has mentioned in the past that it could actually be helpful for the shelter to reduce
Could take some years, but yes, you gotta start somewhere.
Well, I think in general, just that they wouldn't be bringing them in to live at the shelter, they'd be bringing them, or they would.
House them there sometime to pick up, right?
I'm sorry.
Are they gonna house them at the shelter until their time to pick up to go get spayed or neutered? No.
The TNR program's not taking the cats to the shelter.
No. Okay.
The TNR program and the shelter are completely separate from each other.
That's when you pick up a nuisance cat, that would go to the shelter. That's what you're reading in the ordinance.
I mean, as far as the feed, no feed, I mean, I think with what the ordinance is written here, that basically specifies that the organization, individual over the age of 18, provide food, water, or any form of substance to the community cats or community cat colony only upon compliance with the following requirements. I think those requirements are strong enough that, you know, take a picture of the cat, name the cats, cat 1, cat 2, cat 3, however the organization decides to do it. I mean, you know, it's going to be something that's going to take a lot of time to, you know, to attempt to reduce it. But right now I mean, at this moment in time, we kind of need to come up with something that's to reducing the population.
So not feeding them would make it more challenging to track them, right? Because you're not able to put out any food like the lady in the video did.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not talking about feeding for trapping. I'm talking about you have a population of 30 already trapped, neutered, and released back, that they're going out and they're providing an animal shelter and food daily for that animal. That is the type of feeding I'm talking about. I'm not talking about providing food to trap the animal. I'm talking about the other one, because the studies have shown what happens is once they've been spayed and neutered, they become less aggressive, right? They quit marking their territory. They quit doing a lot of those types of things. Well, part of that is they defend their territory less. And the studies, again, from Michigan State, show that those populations then actually increase. And when you provide more food to sustain a population, the population grows. And that is what I'm trying to curb. And that is what we heard from multiple city managers throughout the country when we sat in that workshop.
How can they grow if they're neutered and spayed?
So we're actually, we appreciate the conversation, but we have done that a few times at these previous meetings. So we are going to keep the conversation up here tonight so that we can get a decision for you guys.
I'm a proponent of hitting it from both angles. The goal is population control, as well as them being better neighbors, less spraying, less those negative attributes will be removed. But I also believe that to control the population, the feeding is important, not just from, you know, a large bowl of food, and if you're overfeeding them, that is food that's available for another cat to move into the area, and they're not going to defend it as long as everybody's eating and happy. But what concerns me most about that is the disease transmission when you have, you know, a community bowl of food that's not just cats, it's other rodents, skunks and possums and raccoons and who knows what else all eating out of the same bowl. It just concerns me. So I think a good middle ground is to allow a lot of the advocates for the TNR program to do the good work that they have already started, but really allow them to do that legally and to hopefully organize more publicly so that they can get more work done together, but also be open to explore grant opportunities and to be more involved. But I think we're doing a disservice to the overall population of the cats, as well as some of the folks that we hear about that are opponents of TNR. I think the feeding hits it from both angles. So I believe in passing both the TNR as well as with the clause inside of it that has the feeding. And you still can feed,
Right,
as long as
you
they're
meet these requirements.
your cats. It has had its shots, it's had its rabies shots, as well as, it's been neutered. We don't want you feeding and encouraging every wild animal and every feral cat out there.
And plus, the way this ordinance is written, it gives animal control the ability to make sure that these colonies are somewhat being controlled, that we don't have a bunch of unneutered cats working in that colony.
And you're saying that in favor of the one that allows citizens to feed animals? That was what you're in reference
I
to.
recommend we pass the ordinance as written, as well as the clause for the chapter 5 that limits the feeding of cats. So, passing in both, so it's kind of like, one is almost like an amendment.
We number these number 1 and number 2, so we all know which ones, yeah.
Both ordinances are identical.
Right.
With the exception of allowing the feeding of the cat. So one gives, so the first one that doesn't say revised
Right.
is the
Option
one that
one allows
allows community cat caretaker to trap, neuter, release, and to feed and water the cats. The revised version removes the clause that allows for the feeding and the watering of the cats. They still trap, neuter, and release, but the feeding of the feral cat population is no longer allowed.
Option 1 is TNR on its own, option 2 is TNR and a feeding restriction.
Correct. So passing both ordinances,
You wouldn't do that.
So we're just passing the second one with the
then you pass one.
Well, my hesitation would be money, obviously. I'm not gonna say I don't think it's okay to feed cats or not to feed them, I don't wanna starve them, but I think looking at that, how are these cats gonna get neutered and spayed with no money? I mean, that's my huge thing, because I know the city already is kind of sort of tapped out as far as funding something like this, but.
So this ordinance wouldn't require us to do the TNR. This would just allow citizens to do that if there were a nonprofit out there to do so.
And that's the TNR organization getting, not finding the funding. I mean, that's, but part of them being able to have any chance to find the funding is us approving the ordinance.
And I just question here again, because I'm still kind of puzzled. Very many cities, do they have the TNRs? Is this Warrensburg's one of them that's gonna start going down the line, or other communities that are adopting this?
Sedalia has it, Boonville has it,
400 communities.
Yeah.
Is what
Yeah,
the
of course,
yeah.
I know Summit has it, there's already a pretty, you know, and, I mean, those studies are correct, but I mean, at the same time, you can find another 10 studies that says it worked. I mean, you know, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with any of those studies either.
I know Bob isn't here. I did speak to him, and he had, he was in favor of TNR, and I told him that I would let you guys know what his opinion was, so I'm not telling him without. But he was in favor of TNR. He was concerned about the food, and that just continuing to feed them could continue to increase the population here in Warrensburg, making the problem a little bit more challenging. So, not necessarily my opinion, but I told him I would let you guys know what he was thinking on this.
My opinion is with these folks out here, if you tell them they can't feed them, they're still gonna feed them, they're not gonna starve the animals. So, you might as well leave the feeding in.
I mean, I personally am in favor of the ordinance that allows feeding it with these control restrictions of, you know, you gotta have a list of the cats that are in your colony. Well, that also gives us the ability at some point to determine if any of this is even working. Because if we have if they have the stats that says, you know, there's 30 cats in this colony, and there's still 30 cats in this colony a year later, you know, that's good information, you know, for us.
So how do you, I didn't see in here though where it says that you would maintain a list of
It's
essentially.
maintaining a list of cats by general description.
I'm sorry, I'm seeing it on both.
Yeah,
That's
it's
why
on
I
the
said-
right, yeah.
I didn't think of it as a difference,
Yeah.
okay. Well, the second page, is
It's number 1.
right, but the list itself is not an issue. Okay.
You know, again, both ordinances are identical with the exception of whether or not you're not feeding or not.
I make a motion that we approve the ordinance with allowing feeding.
The first option?
The first option.
No restrictions?
Correct, except for what's written here saying you gotta maintain one distance.
No, this is just a preliminary motion to decide which bill will move forward.
So you're wanting to allow community feeding?
Yes.
Can we ask questions from the floor?
Unfortunately, we did do a couple meetings already where we did that, so this
Oh,
one
okay.
we're gonna press forward with the decision. Yes, please.
Jacobs,
Yes.
Lund,
Are we passing to second
No,
reading? or
no,
just-
This is for the
just
ordinance,
consider.
you're taking a bill and then you'll do your reading.
No.
Allen,
No.
Johnston.
Yes. Well, what do you do now?
That motion has failed. So you have not selected a bill to move forward at this point.
Okay, but so where do we go now, because the other bill's gonna go the other way?
Talk about some more,
Yeah.
maybe we might find some middle ground.
Okay.
Or you need to wait until you have a slack number.
And so Bob is in favor of having the restriction on feeding.
He is, but he's not here to vote
He's not
that.
here.
Yeah.
And you don't like the provision of limiting the feeding?
I don't like the provision of limited feeding because I know the reality of it, they're not going to stop feeding it. I mean, we can have the ordinance in place, but now how do you enforce this ordinance that says they can't feed them when we know it's not gonna stop?
Well, if it became a problem, when you show up and there's no cats in a large area, then there's 50 of them right here in this backyard, there's gonna be complaints, and it would allow us to have some enforcement for that one location that may be, serving larger than they can sustain. Because, unless they can provide documentation that shows that all of these cats have been, I've trapped them and neutered or spayed, and they're all ear tipped, and I can document that, and I can provide documentation to support that. But they have every right to do so. We just don't want them encouraging, inviting other cats and overfeeding them and having every
But that's what,
feral cat.
but that's what the first one is allowing them to feed.
So the first one, my understanding is that it's the Wild West, you feed it whatever you want. The second one, you can feed, but it restricts it to, you can feed the ones that are under your supervision.
No, that's what the first one does. The second one is no feeding, period, you can't feed those cats at all.
Correct. The first one allows for identified caretaker to have a colony of cats. Basically, you have a colony of 30 cats outdoors that are, in effect, your outdoor pets that you take care of just like you would a domesticated cat inside. You go out, you provide the food, or just like these people testified a couple council meetings ago that they spend $300 on cat food feeding these feral cats. Ordinance number 2, the second option, does not allow for the feeding of the feral cats. So you can go out, you can collect them, you can take them and get grant funding, and get them spayed and neutered and bring them back and release them. But the cats will hunt for whatever food they can find, and that's what they eat. They're a feral cat, they're a wild animal, they're doing what they always do, they're hunting. By feeding the population, the studies show, by doing that, you increase the ability of that ecosystem to sustain a larger population, which the studies show increases the number of cats. Because the cats multiply faster, because you can't spay and neuter every one of them, and all it takes is 1 or 2 cats. Again, like they said, having 3 cats a year, they will multiply faster with that food sustaining. So option number 2 does not allow for the feeding of the feral cat population, with the exception of when you're trying to capture them.
I don't want this to come across the wrong way, so please don't take it that way, but is there a study that shows if people actually are following the rule to not feed cats when they're not supposed to feed cats? Because that would be my
We can make that same argument about every ordinance we have. We should let people smoke marijuana because they're gonna do it anyway. We should raise the speed limit to 75 because everyone does 70 anyway, we're supposed to do 55. We can make that same argument on everything. The question is though, is when we notice a problem, we have the ability as a city to come in and enforce and say, you've been feeding these cats, you're not supposed to. Not that we're out there actively looking for them, but when it's reported to us and we find that, we have the ability as a city to implement,
I guess the other thing I see that's on the feed one that's not on this one is that part of the requirements to be allowed to feed is you have to obtain medical care for any cat in the colony that displays obvious signs of trauma or illness, where that's not.
They're on both.
That's on both.
Number
Well,
6
something-
and number 7. It's the feeding over the holidays. So if you're going to allow them to feed, they have to feed and water, including weekends and holidays. Right? Am I understanding that
That's
right?
correct.
in essence, what we're saying is that you have taken responsibility as a caretaker for that population, and you're responsible at all times to feed those cats, because they're now dependent upon you. And if you leave on vacation or whatever else, you still have the responsibility, just like you would your domesticated dog or cat. You've taken, in effect, ownership of those, and you're responsible for them, even when you're not here.
I hear what you're saying on the statistics. I'm not trying to challenge that. I think my difficulty in this is that a rule that's difficult to enforce is kind of not a rule. Like if I never got caught for speeding, I would speed everywhere all the time to get where I need to go. That's my only hesitation. Here, let's go ahead. You would too. I know. I think that's the only hesitation I have. I hear what you're saying and I understand and I agree with the idea that you don't want to bring in more cats. It's the enforceability that seems to be more challenging. You know, and does the city have the resources is the city prepared resource-wise to confront those situations? If you say they are, then that's a different story for me.
The city isn't prepared to do this TNR program the way it's supposed to be done anyway. So effectively what you're doing is you're passing an ordinance that allows these people to take ownership and have a colony of outdoor cats that they take care of all the time. Because as the study shows the experts, the reason I showed you the video clip was to show you experts that are doing this, and all the experts, National Geographic has a similar article in there. These are well-researched, statistically founded findings, not an emotional response. And my job is to bring that information to you. You're going to ignore it if you want. That's up to you. It doesn't matter to me. My point is that to do a trap and neuter release program well, it needs to be long-term, sustained. You don't allow the feeding, and it needs to be well-funded. We're not doing any of that. We're not providing any funding to them to do the TNR program. We're hoping they get some grants for it. For the TNR to be effective, you need to spay or neuter 70 to 90% of the population. They're not going to do that either. So the TNR program, it'll have some effect, but not the effects that are going to accomplish the objectives which you're trying to do. If the objective is truly to reduce the cat population, you need to do all those things I said. Implement the TNR program, fund it well, reduce the feeding, and spay or neuter 70 to 90% of the cats within your population. If you don't do that, the cats will multiply faster than you can keep up with them. They'll continue to grow. They may grow at a slower rate, but they'll still continue to grow.
I know one of my neighbors said something about the program, not negative or positive, but you're bringing it back to the colony it was in. So you're taking it away and you're getting spayed and neuter, which is great because when you bring it back, it will produce. But now you're bringing it back to his neighborhood where he's got 7 to 10 cats already. So now he's going to have 14 to 20, he's thinking, because now there's going to be more come, is what, just an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna have 14 to 20 if he doesn't get anyone fixed anyways.
Good.
If you don't feed him, you will.
I think the tricky part is both of these ordinances are in favor of TNR though. So, right, so would you be saying potentially no to either of these regardless, just because of the TNR issue?
For the city of Warrensburg, since I'm a council member for the city of Warrensburg, I'm not saying this is not good for the city, for the cat population.
Right.
But I'm not quite sure passing this ordinance is going to do what I think TNR wants to do.
Sure. So for you,
That's
it's
my
not
opinion.
necessarily one or the other, it's TNR in general, right?
Yes, that's my opinion.
I mean, I personally think it gives them an opportunity to at least take a chance at it. I mean, right now, we're just running them through the shelter, getting them fixed, and then, if they're over 6 months old, it's over 6 months on Friday, well, that's for August. We were giving them away.
We have free gift Friday on August.
Yeah, so.
We're still gonna have a feral population if we leave them out there and they
Correct.
get out there, so that's we're still gonna have, even though they're spayed and neutered, we're still gonna have that colony, still gonna have those cats running around the neighborhood.
Now, Chief Lockhart, if they were to have the ear tipped and we knew that they were a neutered feral cat, and would they be picked up by animal control later on, or would those cats kind of be like, nah, they're neutered?
When we get complaints on cats, we trap them, so we don't know what we're trapping until we get there.
Okay.
So my guess is if we trapped a tipped cat, we would just release it back.
So it would,
Because there would be no reason to bring it in. We know it's feral, we know it's spayed, neutered, and vaccinated, so.
so potentially decrease the population at the shelter itself for DNR, is long term,
I don't know.
maybe?
So Doug, there was a motion on the table and it was not passed. Do we move on, or what, do we just sit here until somebody gives, or?
Your options are to continue to discuss moving one of these bills forward, or to table it until you have 5 votes available for the issue.
Any ordinance can be amended at any time.
Correct, that's true.
Maybe that, Rob.
I'm speechless right now.
Right now, 36 cats is what we were, 23 of them we were able to find homes for free. And then 13 fell out of the buy one, get one at half price, the kittens, basically.
Are those domestic cats or feral cats?
Those are domestic.
Domestic, it sounds like.
So again, your canines might not help with that.
But the kittens it will, because we're not gonna end up with those kittens.
Again, experts say it's 70-90% spay and neuter, they're gonna keep having kittens faster than you can.
But if I take out 20%, I've at least got a better chance to get to 70% than if I take out nothing.
I brought you the opinion of experts.
You're right.
I think following expert advice is generally the better way to go, because the overall goal is to reduce the population. Also in doing so, we're providing better citizens with the good work that the TNR folks are doing. It is something that is difficult to enforce, and I don't think that we're going to be driving around trying to enforce this, but if something ever did become an issue in the future, we have no teeth to enforce anything if we don't include that clause with it, in my opinion. Because, we're tying the hands. No, I don't think that we're going to be out checking backyards and spotlighting cats and to see where they're all congregating. But should an issue arise that is, that is bad enough for us to seek intervention, this would allow us the tools to do so. If people complain, but I don't anticipate that we're going to be out enforcing this and spending staff time without complaints, in my opinion.
So maybe I'm missing something here, what would be the difference between a feral cat that you're feeding and a cat that you say all of a sudden, no, he's my cat? Like, is there a, this is just an animal, I don't have.
I think I misspoke in that I was kind of looking at the fine print, and I think I missed the overall picture. And I think it's basically one you can feed, and the other one you can't.
Right.
In the one, you have to identify if you're going to feed them. It says that you're going to feed them, all the time, and
right.
they're relying on you. The other one says you're not allowed to do so. So I think I misspoke in that. I side with the experts. If the big picture is to reduce the population as well as provide better citizens.
So as far as, sorry.
I'm in favor of the expert opinion,
TNR.
which is TNR and a feeding restriction. I don't anticipate us enforcing that unless it becomes a major issue. But if it does become a major issue and every neighbor is complaining of 50 cats running all over their yard, we have some teeth that we can step in to stop a course of action, where if we pass it without the feeding provision, they're gonna say, it's written in the ordinance, I can do whatever I want, I can feed every cat, coon, you know, it's the Wild West. And I don't think we want that in our community.
And I do understand where you're coming from, but to starve an animal, I'm not for that, sorry. I'll feed it if it's in my house. And it's gonna be an
I understand that, however.
I know, and I respect your opinion.
But, you know, in doing so, you're feeding other animals as well. And so I just want to have some teeth if it becomes a problem. I don't think in general it will, but we have the ability to enforce them.
I'm sorry, this is where my question is though, that, because I could side that way if I knew the answer to this question. How do you determine this is now my cat, right? They're trap, neuter release, they have their ear tipped, but now I wanna name it Bob and he's my outdoor cat. I had a cat named Bob once.
I can speak to that. From a municipal court standpoint, we would be looking at the facts and circumstances of the case. So that's a difference in the example that you just gave of somebody that's set out a dish of food or someone that's set out a mixing bowl full of food.
I understand.
So it's not that somebody couldn't have an outdoor cat. It would be the feeding of the colony. It would be that type of evidence that we would be looking for. We have to deal with those types of quantity of proof issues in all types of different cases. And, you know, your officers are exercising discretion in those cases, your prosecutor is exercising discretion in those cases, and ultimately the judge makes a decision about whether or not a situation constitutes an ordinance violation. So you've got sort of 3 levels of review and 3 opportunities for somebody to say, hey, that really isn't a violation. So, but the direct answer to your question is that would be a level of degree, whether it's clearly feeding of a colony or feeding of a pet.
Okay, I think that answered it for me. So you cannot put out a tote of food, but you could put out a dish of food.
Right.
Even under the no food rule.
That's correct.
Okay.
We just, in my eyes, we want to have that ability to enforce if a problem occurs. If a backyard is overrun with cats, at some point you have to be able to step in and say, you know, we have a problem, it's a nuisance to the other neighbors.
Well, I'm not gonna speak for the people out there, but I am. I don't think that was the intent months ago when we all started meeting to not feed the feral cats. I don't think that was our intent.
But with the expert advice, they recommended that
not to do either one.
You should, if you pass a TNR, if you want to have some real strength in doing this, these hand in hand will make an impact. And I know we have seen publicly a lot of advocates for TNR. And we've all done a lot of research, but we've also received lots of people who are against TNR privately, many. And so I think this is a good balance that allows them to do the good work that they want to do. They can feed in, you know, quantities that can support the ones that are within theirs, but we don't want to feed 50 cats.
So one more question for someone that might be able to answer this, Chief. If you find a person calls the police department and says, I have a lady next door that has 9 cats and she's feeding it every single day, and I heard the other day that they're not supposed to feed these feral cats, are you gonna go and give her a ticket, citation? What are you gonna do? You were done.
I mean, that's gonna be a question at that point as to, are these domesticated cats or are these wild animals? And I think your animal control officer in the first instance would be able to observe the behaviors of those cats, determine whether that's a colony or whether or not that's a group of domesticated animals. Again, you have to rely on the discretion of your officers to make good decisions, the discretion of your prosecutor to make good decisions, and ultimately your judge as the backstop if those first 2 fail.
But I'm just trying to, if we're gonna make an ordinance this strong that you can't feed the cats, then what is the repercussion on the individual if they are feral and they are being fed?
It would be the same as any of your other ordinance violations. I mean, in that, this type of a violation, any type of an animal control violation, you're usually looking at a monetary fine, typically in a range of somewhere between $25 to $100. The court has authority to impose fines up to $500 in jail for ordinance violations. But in my experience, for this type of violation, you'd be looking at some type of a fine in that range. If that's the ordinance that's in place.
I would assume it'd be like other ordinances where you typically get a warning first anyway.
We're only gonna respond to problems, I mean, we're not gonna get cat patrol, so, you know.
No, but I already know two individuals now, if either one of these are pets, they're gonna call tomorrow and tell you where they're at and where those people are feeding these cats. Sorry, I've already had 2 calls.
But right now, you can't feed,
Right now, you can't do any of that.
so it would be no different than what it is now.
Brian, does that change anything for you? I'm just trying to see if there's worth it to try and revoke.
My concern is you're passing something that we know that they're still going to feed.
That was, so I think that was why I asked my question, if you could still feed a few cats in small quantities versus putting out a tub of food. For me, that makes a difference, because I do think you're attracting other animals when you're putting out a ton of food.
And it all boils down to nuisance, you know, we're not gonna, you know, we don't want that, we want in the event that a nuisance comes up. Has any nuisances come up in the last couple of years that you're aware of, that people have complained and you've had to step in and enforce the ordinance as it reads now?
Not for feeding, we complain about cat behavior.
Yeah, but not for feeding, which is on the books now. So it's, in my eyes, it's similar to that. It's just the first drafting kind of opens it up where we cannot enforce anything. Not that we are going to do that very often, but I think it's important that we have teeth, that we can, in the event that a problem happens. Just like we have ordinances, you know, prohibiting somebody from, you know, hoarding in an area and it becoming unsafe for, you know, for somebody. This will be similar to that. Only in the event that it's a problem, will we respond, which is exactly what we're doing right now, and we have not responded to one yet. That's my, it follows the expert advice and maintains the same level of prevention or teeth, if we decided to act on that we have now. Everybody's in favor of the TNR, and Bob as well. You're not, you're against TNR, but looking at this, TNR is allowed in both of these. It's just one, we kind of maintain the same level of prevention from, you know, overfeeding that we do now.
The no food one is basically just passing TNR, not changing anything else.
Exactly. Which I mean, we're in favor of the TNR program.
Correct, I'm 100% in favor of the TNR program.
We're just talking about the language that we use to do so.
I mean, I guess to be really honest with you, there's one person out there that I wouldn't mind hearing if Megan would be in favor of the no feed.
Yeah, I'm okay if
I wouldn't mind hearing from Megan, I mean, that, cause she's been.
If you're prepared for that, since you've spearheaded the.
Sure, should I come up?
Yes, please. Otherwise YouTube won't hear you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, the concern I have with the no feeding, it makes TNR very difficult. If you don't feed the cats, if they're not congregated, you cannot TNR them. You can't trap them. They're not going to have a routine where they come, and it's just going to be a lot harder to do TNR in general. As far as the feeding ban goes, I mean, if you ban feeding, if you enforce that law, cats are going to be more visible. They're going to have to go searching for food. They're going to be you know, all over town. And right now, if you feed them, the normal people who, caretakers will feed them, you know, at their homes or apartment complexes or wherever, they stay in that general vicinity. If you're not feeding them, they have to venture out and go look for more food, whether that's gonna be trash cans, you know, litter on the side of the road, anywhere that they find it. So that's my main concern about that. Let's see what else I can do.
Are there people feeding them in massive quantities right now?
Honestly, in my experience, the most I've seen is we had a case outside of city limits in Sedalia, had 23 cats. So that was the largest colony I've seen. Whenever you do TNR cats, even though the spaying and neutering reduces their instinct to fight and, you know, spraying and whatever, you know, behaviors come along with that, they still are very cliquish, I guess you could say. They are only their group. They don't allow other intruders in. Feeding them, I mean, it doesn't necessarily, I agree with the statistics and I appreciate those, but I also have to, you know, entertain the idea that yes, it may draw more cats to the area. The community is not necessarily going to grow. I wouldn't say that it would grow. I think that's the wrong choice of words. I think to say they would congregate to a certain area is more, you know, how it would go. But even if that happens, it's going to help us catch and trap and fix and vaccinate more cats. Of course, with our group, we're only going to be allowed to TNR as many cats as we can trap and as many as, you know, we're funded for. You know, we're not going to say, hey, we're going to give these cats because we're going to get money down the road. We're only going to TNR when we have the money. That's just kind of how we already do it, you know, in rescues and in general. So I think that's really all I had.
Can I put you on the spot?
Yeah, sure.
I don't want to make you really unpopular with your group, but I just have a question. Okay. If the language had not come up at all, and it just would have been pass TNR or don't pass it, would you have had a concern about the food?
No, not necessarily.
Under the current ordinance. Sorry, I should have finished saying that.
Oh, okay.
Would you have had a concern about the food issue under the current ordinance?
Is the current ordinance is
that you can't feed in large quantities?
Right. I think that's more of the minor issue of it. I don't see feeding, I mean, I understand that it is a, you know, important aspect of it because you congregate cats and, you know, there are those people that have, you know, a big group of them, but that's not what my focus is. My focus is just to trap, neuter, and return. And basically what we want to do is we're just offering another option. We just want another resource to people that they can reach out to us and get help that they need, because otherwise they'll reach out to the shelter, they'll reach out to other rescue groups, and they can't take, there's nothing that the rescue organization can do because they're so full. So this is just simply, in general, just going to provide another resource for people that live in town. Because I've heard, I don't know how many times, and it's awful that, you know, people who don't have any other, you know, outlet or answer for these cats, they have to take it upon themselves. They say, take it upon myself, whatever that means. And of course, it's not going to be good. It's going to be cruel. So that's basically what our goal is. I feel like it is important to remember that we are on the same page with this. I understand the people who are in opposition of this, but I really want to enforce that long term is important, because we don't want 14, 15 cats, you know, in one area. We don't want them to be outside in general. We want them to, you know, have the happy, healthy, safe home that they deserve, but it's what's best for them. They need to be returned where they can prevent, you know, future kittens who are going to suffer and everything. So, so that's pretty much what the goal is. The other side of it is, if a nuisance call comes in and, you know, it could be whether or not they see a cat and they can call and something about it. So that's another issue about the feeding gantry. You know, they're going to be running around and people can just call and say, hey, there's a cat that's, you know, running loose. And so I don't think that's really going to make a difference. That's just my opinion on it. And I have been doing this for several years now, and I understand like the studies and videos and everything about, you know, how feeding creates the issue. but I also, I also feel that for as many negative and opposition articles and studies that you're gonna find, find that many more positive studies about it too, showing that there are, benefits to it and positive results. So.
In looking at, so what I'm an advocate for is the TNR, what you're talking about, and exactly as you described it. In my eyes, keeping the feeding ban in place allows us some traction should an event arise that it's getting out of hand that we have to step in. It obviously hasn't happened in the last 2 years as it's written, and I don't anticipate that it will be either. But if there ever was a problem, I believe this, we should allow the city to have some teeth so that they can step in to do something about it. Where if we don't have that clause, there's nothing that we can do. And so I think we're on the same page as far as keeping that, and both advocates of TNR. It's just I want to make sure there is something that we can do if that something gets out of hand. We have some type of traction, not that we're going to be out, and we haven't been out enforcing the current ordinance as written, but we can do what your goal is, which is to provide the best safe environment for the cats, and us being able to step in that nuisance time would allow us to do the good work that you're trying to do.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. What I was kind of thinking, I'm just going to throw this out there too. If without the feeding ban, like if we are allowing people to feed cats, and a nuisance call comes in saying, hey, this guy's got 15 cats out here, instead of having them come and find them and whatever, however protocol, follows, we can say, you can feed them, but with the exception that you have to join the TNR program and you have to have, you follow those regulations of feeding them. If that makes sense. I don't know if I said that right.
It just makes it more difficult. I think we have the same intent. It's just one allows us, nobody's going to tell you that you're not allowed to use, the good, some tuna and some wet food and stuff to attract for a TNR program. We just want that clause to keep somebody from having, the fish bowl full of stuff out there that is attracting 50 cats, 100 cats. And so I just want to make sure that we have an avenue to solve a problem if it arrives. That's no different than what the ordinance is similar now that we don't enforce. But if we had an issue, we could. We just luckily have not.
Okay, I see that for both sides.
Yeah.
I view it from the, I guess, optimistic point of view. Like if we have someone who has that many cats, we can come in and say, hey, do you know about TNR? Do you know about, the options that you have here to, provide them a better life and care for them, while preventing future litters. So I kind of use that as an opportunity. That's kind of how I'm viewing it too.
And I think it would be an opportunity. It's just, if somebody's calling in with a nuisance and somebody's feeding cats and there is no ordinance on the books, the staff is going to say, sorry, there's nothing we can do. If there is something on the books, staff can get involved and then reach out to an advocate like yourself that can help them. Without that clause, they're not going to be involved in the conversation to be able to have a warm handoff, to do something. Because from a city perspective, in my opinion, we appreciate the help and we appreciate you doing the good work that you're doing. That's why we want to make it legal for you to do so. We just want to maintain options to enforce if that event arises. It hasn't and likely won't, but if it did, we can take care of it.
Okay.
I can point out too, there's nothing in the ordinance that requires any of the feral cat caretakers to register with the city. Okay. And so we didn't build any of that into the ordinance. Okay. So we can go out, we can find a cat that's been part of the TNR program and had a sniff, but we have no way of knowing who the caretaker of that colony is. Okay, so we try to keep it simple from that standpoint, because we didn't want to necessarily overly regulate all of this. But when we go out and find a population of 7 cats, it's obviously being taken care of, but we have no idea who that is or how to even track them down. So, again, the point of the feeding has to go back again to the experts, the recommendations, and also the experience of other cities that have implemented TNR programs that have been doing this for 10 years, or 15 years, or 20 years, or however long they've been doing it, who consistently come back and say, if I was to do TNR over again, I would limit the feeding of it. Actually, the state of Maryland took care of it for cities, and the fact that they declared feral cats a wild animal, and the state bans the feeding of wild animals. So the cities don't even get to weigh in at that point. And I'm not suggesting we do that here. Again, we want TNR, we want your partnership, we want your volunteerism, but at the same time, we want to avoid the problems that all the other practitioners are telling us are occurring. And you can argue whether or not they're experts or not, but these are cities that have implemented TNR. They've been on the forefront. And they've put these ordinances on the books. And this is the feedback we're getting from them. And we're just trying to keep from repeating those same mistakes. But do it in a way that you guys can do what it is you're asking to do.
Any other questions for Megan? Thank you.
Thank you guys so much, I appreciate it.
I'd like to make a motion, so we see where we are, do we need to make a motion to pass it to second reading, or we just make a motion to get consensus and then decide to pass that to second reading?
You would make a motion to advance one of the two.
I make a motion to pass the TNR with the food restriction. As prescribed by the experts and the cities with previous experience with this. Basically, TNR sitting inside our current ordinances.
Jacobs?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Allen?
No.
Johnston?
Yes.
I move that we pass said bill to second reading by title.
First. Make sure I have the correct one.
Page 65.
I got two. Okay. Okay, an ordinance amending chapter 5 related to the cats of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Warrensburg. Do I have to read more than that?
No.
No.
Now you would have, now it would be right for a motion to pass to second reading.
Move to pass said bill to second reading by title.
Jacobs?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Allen?
Yes.
Johnston?
Yes.
This is an ordinance amending chapter 5 related to cats of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Warrensburg, Missouri. This is for adoption or rejection. Jacobs?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Allen?
No.
Johnston?
Yes. There's that team. 3-month win. Okay, next we have an ordinance adopting Article 2 of Chapter 28. Establish standards for the care of disabled persons in group homes of the Code of Ordinances into the City of Warrensburg.
Madam Mayor and members of the City Council, over the past year and a half, the Warrensburg Police Department has answered hundreds of calls to various group homes in the community. These group homes house some of our most vulnerable members of our community, those suffering from mental illness, as well as developmental disabilities. Guardians typically are not local, and in many cases, are not available to assist officers on scene. After researching the calls, it was discovered in many of these cases, the group home failed to provide adequate care for the residents. I consulted with City Councilor Doug Harrison and determined that there wasn't an ordinance that really addressed proper care of these vulnerable residents. And so what you have before you is an ordinance that would establish some standards that would provide for adequate care of these vulnerable residents of our community and would hold those who are their takers accountable for providing that adequate care. Staff is recommending approval of the ordinance as submitted.
We'll say bill to pass the second reading by pass.
Jacobs?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Allen?
Yes.
Yes.
This is an ordinance adopting Article 2 of Chapter 28, establish standards for the care of disabled persons in group homes of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Warrensburg. This is for adoption or rejection. Jacob?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Allen?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes. Okay, next we have an ordinance adopting section 14-30, compulsory school attendance of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Warrensburg.
Madam Mayor, members of council, the 17th Judicial Circuit has recently adopted an education court program, which is a program that's essentially a diversionary program designed to identify at-risk youth in our school systems. One of those main red flags that the professionals in the juvenile system and the educators have identified is lack of school attendance as an early indicator of potential future problems, either with families that have allegations of abuse and neglect, or with juveniles that become delinquent under our criminal laws, or with juveniles whose mental health needs are not being met. And unfortunately, we've seen examples even in our own community of young people that have taken their lives at extremely young ages. And so the focus of this program is to identify those people and for court personnel to become involved with them in the school system to help assure attendance. And one of those things which the court has asked the communities in the circuit to do is to consider an ordinance such as this. There is a state law for compulsory school attendance, but a local ordinance would provide another tool in the toolkit for the juvenile office and the courts to provide an incentive to the parents to participate in these programs and to assure that these young people are getting the services that they need. And so if at the request of the court and with the agreement of city staff, this ordinance has been prepared for your consideration to help provide that incentive for parents that are not otherwise willing to support the efforts of this program.
So is that something with like the school, high school level especially?
This actually would be focused more on the earlier grade levels, elementary and middle school age, to try to identify. Yes, I'm certain that there would be some participation at the high school level, but the focus of this is for the younger school age children.
Just so I'm clear, because I agree with what I read there, especially since I have friends in the district, social workers and attendants. To the parents with this, if somebody called from the school?
It wouldn't actually, like,
how does this?
but we would be notified at the point in time that there was somebody that was just completely non-compliant, that the school had tried to talk with the parents, that these court personnel involved in this program had tried to talk to the parents, and there was just complete apathy. And even so, we have provided in the ordinance the ability for law enforcement to provide that first warning, that instruction that we've now been notified, and there will be the issuance of a ticket. So there's several levels of opportunity for a parent to become interested and involved before a ticket would actually issue.
Or citing the parent for failure for their kid to attend school.
A parent or guardian for a failure to assure attendance after all of these other steps have been taken.
But they have to be under the age of 14.
They have to be under the mandatory school attendance requirement, which is 16.
Okay. You escaped the state.
This tracks the requirements of state statute and is modeled actually on an ordinance that was adopted by the city of Kansas City.
This kind of does everything else the state of Missouri does. Leave that 16, 17-year-old kid just hanging out there to dry.
Unfortunately, the policymakers in Jefferson City have made some of those decisions.
Believe me, I know that.
Okay.
Move to pass that ordinance to second reading by title?
Jacobs?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Allen?
Yes.
Johnston?
Yes.
This is an ordinance adopting section 14-50 compulsory school attendance of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Warrensburg. This is for adoption or rejection. Jacobs?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Allen?
Yes.
Johnston?
Yes. Okay, next we have an ordinance amending ordinance 5365 concerning the adopted fiscal year 18 annual budget and ordinance 5474 concerning the adopted fiscal year 19 annual budget for the community investment program.
Mayor, members of the city council, these amendments before you are the last items of business for the fiscal year 18 budget. There are several projects that were not completed in fiscal year 18. So staff will like to move those funds into the 19 budget. The uncompleted projects were the door security upgrade, the sewer manhole lining, and the purchase of performance evaluation software. Are there any questions regarding any of the amendments?
Just have Bill do the second reading by title.
Jacobs?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Allen?
Yes.
Johnston?
Yes.
This is an ordinance amending ordinance 5365 concerning the adopted fiscal year 18 annual budget and ordinance 5474 concerning the adopted fiscal year 19 annual budget for the community investment program. This is for adoption or rejection. Jacobs?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Allen?
Yes.
Johnston?
Yes. Okay, next we have an ordinance amending section 3-36, application, investigation of the Code of Ordinances in the city of Warrensburg, Missouri.
Mayor, members of the city council, at the September 10th council meeting, we discussed a timeline and fee schedule for liquor license renewals. What you have before you is an ordinance, putting the timeline and the fees in place. What is being proposed is a liquor license renewal. Inspections are to be completed in the month of January and February. The first inspection will be free along with the first follow-up inspection if they are done within the months of January and February. Any liquor inspection done outside of those months will be charged a fee of $225, which is basically what it costs the city to mobilize our resources to do those inspections. This timeline has been put together to encourage business owners to use the checklist that is provided to them when we mail out the reminders for the liquor license and to get their inspections done early. Staff will recommend approval of the ordinance.
So was there a fee before this one, or we're doing the 225 for the third time?
No, there was not a fee for this, and we had about a third of our businesses coming in for another inspection in the later months of June, which made it really hard on staff and on the resources that we have here, especially with all of the business licenses and different roofing and different things like that that are happening during that time period.
So obviously, after this is passed tonight, if passed, we'll let the businesses know that this, you need to do this, or this is what's gonna happen.
Yes, and potentially we could give them a sort of a notification here, just let them know, let them get used to it this first time.
I like it if it gets it done earlier.
Yeah. More efficient.
So we'll say Bill need to move the second reading by title.
Jacobs?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Allen?
Yes.
Johnston?
Yes.
This is an ordinance amending section 3-36, application, investigation of the code of ordinances of the city of Warrensburg, Missouri. This is for adoption or rejection. Jacobs?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Allen?
Yes.
Johnston?
Yes. Okay, up next we get to hear about the inclusive ballot. Go get them.
You have a resolution.
Did I miss something?
You have a resolution, it's follows up on that ordinance.
It's after the, that's item 2 under
I'm
inclusive.
sorry, I was looking at
Are we okay with it?
Yeah.
I didn't recognize you with your hair.
Yeah, I was saying.
It's fluffy now.
Sorry, your barber.
Look, I haven't worn my hair long since I was 17, joined the service. My wife, I don't cheat, I don't drink, so she's let me wear my hair out. I don't know, so. Okay, liven up city council a little bit. Oh my gosh, it's cool. My thing tonight is primarily, most of you've seen on Facebook that it's running along. Danielle's group's, taking over that and stuff like that. But primarily was, he asked for some updates from the fundraising you helped us do. I think we're getting there, the final numbers coming in and getting the park open. So really the deal was just kind of a final thank you to the community. This is really a wonderful thing, I think, and we came together as a community, and it's kind of neat watching what we can do as people as opposed to like some of the circus we see on the news at the national level, right? And stuff. So any questions about it? I don't know, do you have an estimated date you're gonna?
We have some grading that we need to do on the playground, and then a couple finishing touches, and then we have to have it inspected, and we'll hope to have a ribbon cutting.
Yeah, and I haven't slid on anything yet. I've been reserving it. I was out there tonight with my grandson, took pictures. No, you can't go running yet. So anyway, but about to see it. But that's kind of about it. Is this satisfy some of the updates that you specifically look for it? I mean, that's it. I'll let you go.
Thank you.
Here.
Okay, next we have a resolution of the City Council of the City of Warrensburg, Missouri, establishing fees for liquor license inspection.
Mayor, members of the city council, this resolution will set the fees for the ordinance that we discussed earlier. Staff recommends approval of the resolution.
Move to approve?
Jacobs?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Yes.
Johnston?
Yes. Okay, next we have a Proposition D discussion.
So, as you're probably aware, the state legislature has approved Proposition D, which takes to the voters of the state of Missouri what's often referred to as a gas tax, and was letting the voters of Missouri decide that. I wanted to provide the council an opportunity to discuss this from a staff perspective. By state law, we cannot advocate for or lobby for approval of any bond issue or any ballot issue. Council, however, can take an official position, and many, I believe many councils and mayors are getting involved in trying to help encourage their communities to become educated and vote favorably on this. The impact to the city of Warrensburg is, after this is phased in, I think it's phased in over a 4-year period. At the completion of that phase-in, the city of Warrensburg, so there's basically 3 pots of money. There's a pot of money that goes to the State Highway Patrol. There's a pot of money that goes to the Department of Transportation. And then there's a pot of money that's divvied out to counties and local city governments. Based off of the revenue estimations, the city of Warrensburg, once this is fully implemented, if approved by the voters of the state, the city of Warrensburg would see about $297,000 a year in revenue to help support the maintenance of our streets, and bridges, and those types of things. So obviously, it has a significant potential impact to our ability to maintain our infrastructure. But I want to provide the council an opportunity to discuss this, and whether the council wanted to weigh in and have an official position publicly for the residents of Warrensburg or not. I've been forwarding to you information that's been coming out of an organized group of mayors and those types of things. So there's a significant collaboration and effort. And I didn't know if you were interested in participating in that or not, or whether you even agree with the proposition or not. So I just wanted to provide you an opportunity to have a public discussion on that, and if you wanted to take an official position on it.
If I might weigh in here a little bit on this. A lot of you may not be aware of the fact that MoDOT does pay for all the highway patrol. They pay for their trucks, or their cars, all their operation. That comes out of MoDOT funding. The reason this is set up the way it is, on this valve issue is, this money would go toward the highway patrol and supporting them, and then that money that has been used previously for highway patrol, would go towards, roads and highways in the counties and cities. So, some people think it's a highway patrol, tax, but it actually is relieving MoDOT of the liability of taking care of the operation of the highway patrol.
So hopefully it'll provide two avenues of revenues to the city. Anytime we would partner with MoDOT on their infrastructure. So for example, the signal upgrades we're doing right now, or the McGuire Bridge, hopefully MoDOT then would have a bigger pot of money within their funding to help the city of Warrensburg. But also in addition, we would have this dedicated revenue stream to the city specifically that we can use on our infrastructure.
So that's $300,000 we're gonna get.
Regardless of what
Regardless,
MoDOT
I asked them for it, it's gonna show up in our bank account.
But hopefully MoDOT also has a bigger pot of money to assist in local projects also.
So with the tax, how long, without reading it, how long will that be, or do they go back to the voters in 10 years and?
Is it sunsetted?
4 years. Well, 4 years phase in.
I mean, like the tax itself, is it like ongoing, or is it 10 years and then you have to go back and ask for it again, or to the voters? If it gets passed? No sunset.
It takes 4 years to get up to, the point where you're paying like $5.50 a month extra for your fuel, with that tax.
So what happens if we don't get the 296,000 in 4 years?
Well, I spoke to,
Is there a promise, are we signing something saying we're gonna get that money?
It's based off on what we receive now, the revenues we receive now. So, I mean, it would be like, any other tax, if people stop buying gas, and yeah, then revenue will go down, so that projection will be lower.
I have a quick question on this, like, infographic. It says it would cost the average person an additional $1.28 per month. But then it's also 10 cents per gallon. Are they assuming that you're only buying 12.8 gallons per month? Yeah.
We have that second page, I don't.
It's just kind of odd. I know you guys didn't create this, I've seen this before, but.
Well, they're making assumptions on what the average user uses and purchases in gas, so that's gonna vary.
12 gallons.
But
well, it says there 2.5 cent increase.
for every 2
You'll be paying $1.28.
So at 10 cents,
okay, this says 10
you
cents per
multiply that
gallon.
by 4, so you'd be paying almost $5 a month extra with a full 10 cents.
Okay.
Because it's in 2.5 cent increments, and then the full implementation is in 6 cents, so it's 4 increments.
So
Got it.
what percentage of that here increase in budget? I mean, we put $300,000 more in our road maintenance.
Well, it's $300,000 more than what we would have.
Right, what's
That's
that
almost
percentage?
50%.
What's that?
Our gas tax we receive now is around $600,000, $700,000. So it's almost 50% increase.
So over a 20-year period, which we would normally bond our road infrastructure out. Of course, we didn't do that with Veterans Road. We bonded those over a shorter period of time, but that would be probably close to $6 million over a 20-year period.
That's gonna be my next question. If you get one, then you get that every year, every 2 years, or what are you thinking after 4 years that the gas tax will see Warrensburg? It's not like once we're gonna get 369 and that's it, you're never gonna get any more money.
No, you'll continue to get that, you'll get that annually.
It's based off of the gas revenues of the state, and then it's divided out through a formula, and they're estimating our share would be 297,000.
Right.
Yeah, so basically, instead of, getting 700,000 a year, we would be getting a million. After 4 years.
Right.
The service portion of the gas tax has been at 17 cents since, I believe, 1996, over 2 decades. We know that everything has gotten much more expensive. However, the gas tax that we receive has not increased. That's why we're number 49 in the state of Missouri, and when we have the 7th largest infrastructure to maintain by miles. And so this is in my opinion, a long overdue discussion that we're having that the state is supporting. The governor was advocating it this week. I think this is an extremely important item on the ballot, and I think we should take a stance to support this. It is in our benefit as well as the state's benefit to have the infrastructure in place so that we can, continue to allow commerce to flow freely. Johnson County Economic Development Corporation has come together and unanimously supported it. I put together a letter, and I would propose that Warrensburg does do the same, and saying that we encourage the voters to get behind this, and that it is long, long overdue.
I agree.
Agreed.
So if it's okay, then, staff will, I guess, work with the mayor in drafting a letter, the council position on that, and we'll bring that back to you at a future council meeting, that we can officially adopt it.
There's not a future council meeting.
Yeah, I guess that's
There's
true.
an election.
I guess that's true.
Can we grant you the authority to act on our behalf?
Yeah, we can draft a letter, and then, we'll get that to the press and on our website. Whatever the attorney tells us we can do, we can't do.
Spend public money, that's it.
Yeah. At the very least, I'm sure Sue will make sure that what we discussed here in our intent makes it to our population, even if an official letter doesn't make it.
Right below the TNR. Maybe both.
We'll work on that.
Okay. Appearances to the council not listed on the agenda. Not sure if they're still here. Tammy Robert. I think I know everybody. Tammy's not here. Okay, next we have mayoral appointments. Okay, I would like to appoint Rebecca Long to the Historic Preservation Commission. And then before we vote on that, we do need someone from Planning and Zoning to sit on the Historic Preservation Commission, and I'd like to wait on that one until we do the next Planning and Zoning meeting so that I can take a consensus of who feels they would best serve on that. So there's two things in one there.
What kind of motion?
Jacobs?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Allen?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes. Okay, next we have miscellaneous matters from the mayor and or city council. Okay, so we did attend the ICSC last week. Am I gonna steal your thunder?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
He's talked to nuts and that already.
So the ICSC was a great opportunity for us to go to the retailers and speak to them and developers, and really sell them on Warrensburg and to see who may have an interest. I know from a franchise perspective, one thing we've discussed as franchise owners is that it can be very difficult to go to a franchise and say, I want to be a franchisee and this is my community. And if they've never heard of that community before, that's a big challenge, because now you're overcoming that hurdle on top of selling yourself, you're selling your community. So this was a really neat opportunity for some of those, because then they got to hear of Warrensburg and learn a little bit about Warrensburg first. It appeared to me, at least, most of these were not first timers, so that's great because it kind of, you planted the seed, now you're watering it. And we had some really good discussions. I don't know which ones you're going to talk about. Yeah.
None of them by name.
None of them by name. Nothing that's public except the ones that are public. On Review the Bird. So anyway, I think it was really good discussion. It was a long day. Suzanne Taylor was able to go with us, and I think she was a great advocate for the city and the business climate in Warrensburg, and how excited our community is to have new businesses. Is there anything I missed that you would like to add?
I would agree. I think it's, very important that we're present there. It gives us that name recognition, that brand recognition on two fronts, visiting with developers and the real estate folks, as well as talking to those potential franchisors to let them know that we're very accepting and business friendly in our community, and here we are out advocating in Chicago as well as other places that we're on the map and open for business, and whenever potential franchisee comes forward, should make it hopefully a little easier for them to make that decision. So I think we have really good conversations there. I would, a lot of the stuff that we talk about, it may be years for some of those projects to come to fruition, but I think it's important that we continue to stay the course and to spend a little bit of money to market Warrensburg, to keep the momentum building, so we can kind of success breeds success, and we're in a good position, and I think moving forward we will continue to be, as long as we stay the course and provide funds to support those things.
So I think with that said, we do probably need to start talking about who would potentially go to Dallas. Is that something we talk about now, or does that have to be an agenda item? It's a miscellaneous matter. By the mayor. By the mayor.
I don't think that, I think you're okay.
Okay. So I think I'd like to put it out there so that we can start, obviously booking flights around the holidays is not a fun thing to do.
It'll be January 9th, I believe is when it was, and we'll be going to Fort Worth. They've rebranded, and this is kind of the Chicago ICSC deal making, but it's for the Texas-Oklahoma area region, and they've rebranded it to the Red River States Deal Making Conference, so it'll include Texas and Oklahoma. But again, it was early January, I believe, and so we'll be going down. We'll be having a booth. We budgeted to have a booth this year, just like we do in Chicago. We won't have as big of a presence. We take 5 people with us to Chicago. This time it will just be me and one of you as a council member to go with me down there. Hopefully we'll grow that over time. There may even be a logical argument that we kind of take a smaller presence in Chicago and have a bigger presence in Texas at some point in the future. But this year we're doing the booth, and then there'll just be 2 of us, and as we grow that, we may need more support later on down the road. But it would be helpful to know if anyone's schedule is available and if you're willing to go south in January with me to help staff the booth and talk to people.
Myself, that's a bad time. I know I'm on the council, but I can't go. It's a bad time of the month for me personally.
I know we talked a little bit to see if either of you would want to attend, since we've already gone to one, and I think all of us can sell Warrensburg pretty easily at this point. I don't know if that's good or bad in the real estate world.
My calendar's open during that time frame, but if you wanted to go as the mayor, I completely understand that, so.
I appreciate that. I think you sell it just as well as I would. You sell houses, I just sell commercials. I sell pitas, so that's fine.
I'm willing to go. I don't know my exact availability, and so we can kind of follow up and see, who wants to go amongst.
You two.
Us two, or you two. It doesn't matter to me, but I'm willing to go if I'm available. I would have to look at the kids' schedules and all of that stuff. I'm not prepared to make that decision, but happy to go and volunteer my time.
Is there a certain deadline that you don't want to have to make a decision?
Consider, we're back to better the air, well, actually technically probably one of the airfares, because I'll probably rent a vehicle and drive all the booth stuff down again, so just two of us if someone want to drive, but the schedule doesn't allow for that, we budgeted for airfare for one person as well, so someone could fly down there. If we are flying something, the sooner we know, the better airfare we'll get.
Do you two want to talk about it and come back the next meeting?
Yeah, well, it's fine, we'll figure out our schedule.
Are you okay with that one?
Yeah, no, I'm fine. I would think,
We have to have them registered by then. So we
I'm not
registered
sure if
by.
registration is open yet, we'll have to work, we'll register 2 people. So
Okay.
I'm not worried about that one too much.
I would change the name.
If I'm willing to go, I'll just, ride along from Colbert.
Yeah, I have a problem riding.
So that's a flight option.
I've made that drive before, so.
Well, Brian and I will figure it out.
Okay. Anybody have anything else miscellaneous? Okay. All right, city manager's report?
Just to follow up on that, I know I said I wouldn't name one specifically by name, but there was one, we saw an article in one of the Kansas City publications about Dunkin' Donuts having secured a franchisee and looking for sites in Sedalia and Warrensburg. That is one of the franchises we have been talking to over the last several years in Chicago. So we're making progress. Our challenges continue to be often finding a franchisee and finding an adequate site. Those continue to be challenges for our community. So we have businesses that are interested in coming to Warrensburg, but they have trouble with one of those 2 things. Dunkin' Donuts has now found a franchisee for the region, but is still looking for sites. So we're going to work on that. Spirit Halloween is another one that we've been talking to for a few years. While that might be a small win because it's only open for a month and a half or 2 months, it still provides a service and something to our community that otherwise wouldn't be here. So I appreciate the mayor and the council members continuing to support that effort. I think it's paying off. We're having good conversations and we're learning about what challenges we have as a community so we can address those issues and make that a smoother process for our community. So I appreciate that. Also, upcoming this week is homecoming with UCM. And again, I appreciate the council's support in helping us host Brigadier General Nichols as well as Colonel Eves, who will be riding with city officials in the homecoming parade. I think it's great that we show that support for our base. Having recently been up at the Pentagon and having conversations with senior leadership in the Air Force, they know Whiteman, they know Warrensburg, and they know the efforts that we make to support our base, and they appreciate that. And it has an impact in the decisions they're making. It's a little different when you're in Tucson and everyone's complaining about the jet noise around their houses that were built after the base was there and they don't want it anymore. So there you have a community that's arguing against expansion of the base versus us, who are very open and very supportive of our military personnel and the operations they do. That is seen and recognized by the decision makers in the Pentagon. And so it's important that we continue to do that. It's important that we continue to partner with Whiteman Area Leadership Council and the Chamber's Military Affairs Committee and the Base Community Council and those, because all of those make a difference. It keeps us busy. It takes time and resources to do that, but it's important because the base is a major partner and a major asset to our community and our economy. So, with that, just a reminder again, we'll have one council meeting in November. So it'll be the 3rd Monday of the month instead of the 2nd. And I don't think I have anything else tonight.
Topic to meet up for.
I'll communicate. Okay.
Matthew?
I just wanted to point out that in the finance report, we have the unaudited year-end quarterly reports. And if you take a look at it, in short, basically we spent less than we budgeted and we brought in more than we budgeted. And revenue, so that's a good thing.
Just want to bring up a little bit of information. We just talked about fuel tax and talked about growing the community. We've done several projects this year. It's been a really big season for us as far as on the public works side. But thinking back, we've done Veterans Road Phase 2, Veterans Road Phase 1, the downtown phase. We're currently working on signal upgrade project. We also put about 500,000, almost 600,000 into our street maintenance, curb and sidewalk. All told, we spent, basically invested in the community about $4.5 million this year. So we've had a lot of improvements done around the community at a pretty good cost, but many times we approve things by piecemeal, bit to pieces on each one of these projects, and don't realize what our total value of what we've done in the year. And that's just for your all's information, where we're leading to as far as growing in the community.
Can you provide an update on the timeline for the roundabout, Hawthorne and McGuire?
Well, we met with our engineers. We're looking to bid on the roundabout right after the first year. Hopefully we get a better pool of bidders. We only had 2 last time. Hopefully that we can get some more competitive bids for projects that are come within our budget. And so we'll get that. We'd like to have everything, once we find a successful bidder at price we can afford, we'd like to get that project start walking and going out to 11th of March. So we'll be trying to get things to cancel after open bid.
Come on, so there is probability that we may have to, as a city, put some funding into that project. So just to kind of keep everybody up to speed, there might be a decision down the road that we'll need to make regarding that roundabout.
Thank you. Gary?
Nothing bad.
Marcy? Nothing additional?
Yeah, I'd just like to add, we began our open enrollment process this week, along with some changes from our broker representative, the McKinnis Group. It was a very efficient process this year. They brought some really good changes. We had representatives from Blue Cross Blue Shield, Delta Dental, Unum, as well as Equity Bank, and it's moving along very well. And then also this week we'll have a pretty good contingent of city employees that will be getting flu shots at Flu Fair on Friday. So
I couldn't get one.
it's moving along very well and very pleased.
Chief Kushner's out Wednesday. Tomorrow we start our company training with the new ladder. Each shift do 8 hours with the company representative on the ins and outs and the particulars of the new piece of equipment. And then we're getting ready for homecoming.
This hat will be what all your officers are wearing for the homecoming parade. So all the officers who are on parade duty will wear that instead of their regular hat. I want to thank UCM's athletic department and Michelle Schubert specifically. They donated the hats to us, so we're able to show our UCM pride at no cost to the city, which is always fun. And more importantly, on the 29th, next Monday, we're going to be hosting a community forum on suicide prevention out at the community center from 6:30 to 8. What we'll be doing is asking 3 questions. What are we doing now? What can we do? And how do we get those things started that we want to do? It's designed to be a facilitated brainstorming session. We probably won't have any solutions coming out of it. We anticipate having several more forums and then producing a product that we'll be able to distribute community-wide to let people know what resources are available and hopefully help prevent suicide.
I just wanted to mention, I guess my wife must have seen one of the officers wearing the pink badge or saw it someplace, and she did say how much that meant to It could have been a picture of you, I don't know. Been in the hospital the last 5 days, so I don't know where she was seeing it, but when I stopped by to see her today, she mentioned how much that meant to her to see those pink badges out there.
We've been getting a lot of support for it. On October 1st, I asked everybody, I said, you know, my grandmother's why I'm wearing mine, what's your reason? So we actually had 6 more officers. I think we're up to about 20 out of 36 now. We actually got Andy Munster in the byline this year.
I saw that.
He wore it one day, so we're encouraging him.
One day at a time.
One officer, one day at a time.
I did one last thing, the Christmas tree that we're gonna be doing last week of November. The Main Street contacted me earlier today, and I guess the library is interested in having some sessions where they will create ornaments that will be suitable for the trees. So they're gonna be in contact with you on what would best.
You're gonna put them on the Main Street?
Yeah.
Okay.
The community will build them and create them, so.
That reminds me of the ribbon cutting of downtown phase 4, October 31st, right before the trick or treat downtown. And then Greg also reminded me, we purchased software for the implementation of the performance evaluation system, so he's doing a lot of the background work, getting all that set up, and then we'll work on training supervisors, department heads. Our goal is to be able to begin doing evaluations for all employees using that software mid-November. We'll do that on an annual basis, and the ability through the software to follow up and take employee input and all those types of things. Making progress on that front also.
All right. Okay, thank you.
I'll send out an email.